Okay. Welcome to session number, let's see, 26 of Genesis in Depth. This is a verse by verse study through the book of Genesis. I'm Dr. John McMath, professor of Old Testament at the Moody Bible Institute, retired these several years now, sort of. It's hard to imagine that what I'm doing is retirement, but there it is. I wonder how I ever found time to work for a living. I'm joined here from this palatial penthouse studio in the snow-covered mountains of North Idaho by my friends in Italy and in the Philippines. This is a session that I look forward to every week about this time, and we record these sessions on YouTube and Facebook. You can find that on in either section by looking for John McMath, and we've got all kinds of different things going. If you've got about 500 hours to kill, that's one way of doing it. So let's jump into Genesis at chapter 28. And let's see if I can make this share work the way it is advertised to work. Bingo. And we have a connection here. Looks like it's going to work. Okay, and I'm told that this is all okay. Welcome. Uh, Actually, this should be a 28 instead of a 29. We're starting here in chapter 28. The journey to Padanaram actually begins in chapter 28, and this section is it's interesting and enigmatic at the same time. There's Last week we saw Jacob's beginnings, the grasper, the con man. I wouldn't quite call Jacob a villain, but he is definitely an anti-hero. From the beginning, God promised that Jacob would be blessed, that he would inherit a blessing from God of the land, of the promise. The Messiah would pass through him. Uh, Jacob is the child of promise, and he is in the line. And so God will fulfill these promises. But Jacob makes a career out of trying to find God's blessing in all the wrong places. Uh, he he tries to accomplish by his own work the blessing that God has already promised him. So Jacob is a great example for us of uh, the people that we know who believe that they can be saved essentially by doing the works that perhaps the church insists they do, or perhaps they've established their own religious system, if they follow what they consider to be the important parts of the Ten Commandments, everything will be fine. Their ignorance is kind of sad, but it's a common attitude that says God isn't going to give me anything. I have to do for me whatever I need done for me. And this is a portion of Scripture that is going to focus us back on the necessity of faith in God alone. Our justification, our position before God, is a result of God's work in us, not our work for God. And that's always a difficult thing, and it's a difficult balance because we do, in fact, need to work for God. Good works are a good thing. Read the book of James. but we don't accomplish that under our own power. Uh, this is a this is a biblical concept, not a New Testament concept. It goes all the way back earlier than this. We find it in Genesis 1. But for now, we're going to take Jacob apart because he's a fascinating character. 28, 1 through 5. We've got Isaac sending Jacob away. And Isaac called Jacob, blessed him, directed him, "You must not take a wife from the Canaanite women." That much we all already know. The Canaanites were then in the land. Canaanites, Amorites, Girgashites, Perizzites, Hivites, whatever. Hurrians, we know there were Hittites. There's a variety of different groups of Philistines. Uh, Isaac is using the term Canaanite to speak of all of the pagan women who were in all of the nations that at that time lived in the promised land. There was no unified state at this time. The land that today we call Israel was then just open land, mostly pasture land, with larger cities in the valleys, and the territory was more or less controlled for trade route reasons by either Egypt or some power in Mesopotamia or some power in what is modern Turkey, either Hittites or some kind of Hurrians or the Egyptian powers. And that changed from time to time. There never was an independent state of any sort in Canaan prior to the establishment of the Israelite kingdom, and that comes under Saul and then David and Solomon. David and Solomon consolidated this area and really made the first real state of Israel. That's not until about 1000 BC. So we're still 1,000 years away from a state in Israel. And during all of that time, while Israel is incubating in Egypt, the Canaanites are in the land, but they never established a state. I say that because the modern so-called Palestinians, the Arabs who came to Israel 100 years ago in order to get jobs from the burgeoning new state of Israel, uh, those Palestinians are demanding their own state because they are the original inhabitants of the land, and that's not true. The Palestinians are a mixed group of people. They come from Arab states, and they came because those Arab states were failing, and Israel was a place where they could get jobs. Now they would like to destroy Israel and take that land in order to establish their own so-called state. And places like the Gaza Strip give us a really, really good example of what a Palestinian state would look like. Um, Israel is the first and really only state that's ever existed on that land. Uh, from a historical point of view, that's that's fairly important. However, there were Canaanites all over the place at this time, and you must not take a wife from the Canaanite women. Instead, arise, go to Padanaram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take as a wife from there one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. Okay, so go to family. Now that sounds like a really good idea, very conservative idea. Stay more or less within your family circle to find a wife for Jacob. The problem is that the people of Padan Aram were not believers. They were pagans every bit as much as the Canaanites. Their only advantage was that they were the same family that Abraham came from. So there's some questions we could follow there, and we're not going to. But take for as your wife from there one of the daughters of Laban. So God Almighty bless you. The term God Almighty here is a term that we don't see a lot in the Old Testament. We do see it. El Shaddai. El, of course, is God. And Shaddai means something to the effect of all powerful, almighty, omnipotent. The New Testament word it comes out in Greek, pantocrator, is the all-conquering one. And that's a good translation of Shaddai. Uh, we find it in the patriarchal narratives a lot. And this seems to be the favored name for the patriarchs. But here we have it again. God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you. Okay, so the emphasis here is on Jacob becoming a great family. So God bless you, make you fruitful, multiply you, that you may become a company of people. The whole group is what he wants. So Jacob is actually being sent to Padanaram in order that he might establish a family, a clan, if you will, of his supposed to be wife and children. It's going to end up being wives and children, along with servants and employees who will form a company of people, quite a large number, which will eventually come back to the land of Israel. May he give the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojournings that God gave to Abraham. So Isaac is passing on the blessing of the land. Isaac has been promised that this land in which you're sojourning uh, will be yours and your offspring's forever and ever. So this is the hallmark point of the Abrahamic covenant, is this land promise. Uh, and it's a very important distinction between Israel and the church. The church has no promised land. There is no one particular place on the planet that we have to go to establish a state. That was for Israel, and in fact, it is still for Israel. This is the fundamental argument of uh, what theologians call dispensationalism. This is the idea that Israel and the church are different in God's plan, and we ought to track the plans of Israel and of the church separately. The Bible makes it clear that the promises to Israel are uniquely for Israel and not to be understood allegorically of the church. A large percentage of the church today believes that the promises to Abraham ought to be understood allegorically as promises to the church, and that therefore the church is a replacement for Israel. There's no place in the Bible that supports that, but there are theological arguments for that position, and that continues to be a toss-up in the in the ongoing conversation within the church today. So Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Padanaram to Laban, the son of Bethuel. Uh, and he's the brother of Rebekah and Jacob and Esau's mother. Okay, now Esau, meanwhile, stage left. Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Padanaram to take a wife from there, and that as he blessed him, he directed him, "You must not take a wife from the Canaanite women." And that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and gone to Padanaram. So when Esau saw that the Canaanite women did not please Isaac his father, Esau went to Ishmael and took as his wife, besides the wives he had, Mahalat, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth. Okay, so Esau already has a couple of local Canaanite women, and in order to um, try to make his father happier, he went to the son of Abraham, Ishmael, actually to that family, and took as his wife a lady by the name of Mahalat, who is the daughter of Ishmael. That's all. It's fascinating. So we get this mixture of peoples. The people today that we call Arabs are essentially the people who speak Arabic. They're not a single nationality, and frankly, Arabic-speaking people come in all colors, all shapes and sizes. All they're all over the place. All over the Middle East and in North Africa, we find people speaking Arabic, and all of them are related in one way or another to this multitude of biblical characters that we've seen so far. So Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. Okay, good thing. He's heading north, and he's heading along what we call the patriarchal highway. If you look at a map of Israel, you'll find that from Beersheba, if you head north through the Negev up into the highlands, not along the Jordan, which would take you to the right, or along the Mediterranean, which would take you to the left, but dead ahead, straight north, you'll come to the place we call Hebron, which is where the patriarchs are buried, where Jacob will eventually be buried. You'll come then continuing northward to Bethlehem. Then you'll walk past Jerusalem. You'll eventually head past Shechem, where uh, 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 we've got all kinds of interesting problems coming. From Shechem, you continue north until you find your way through the Golan Heights and through Damascus, which is the capital of Syria. From Damascus, you'll continue heading north along the edge of the Fertile Crescent through all of the spots along the northern rim of Mesopotamia in the headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And that's where he's going. He's going the right way to get there. And he came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. All right. The place where Jacob stopped didn't have a name. Jacob is going to give it a name. It will be about a day's walk, half a day's walk, 12 or so statute miles. That would be about 15 or 16 kilometers north of Jerusalem. By this time, he's walked for probably 3 or 4 days. This is not a long journey so far, but he stopped one night at a certain place because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, which is very common, this territory north of Jerusalem is known as the Central Benjamin Plateau. It's a wide spot in the watershed of the Judean hill country. As you walk further and further north, the land gets rockier. And at the point where Jacob stopped, there's more rocks than soil. just the way it's worked. It's a limestone, and the way it has eroded, the rocks pop up. So that's where he stopped. And taking one of the stones, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. The term ladder means a set of steps. This chalice was found uh, in the archaeology of a place called Antioch in Syria. Uh, and this dates to before the time of the Crusaders, but it was probably made by Christians in Antioch as a commemoration of the ladder between heaven and earth that Jacob found. It's in the museum in where is this thing? It's in one of the Western museums. This may be in Berlin, but kind of a neat thing. Uh, and it gives us some idea. Could it be a shallow staircase like this? Well, it could be, or it could be a ladder going straight up the side of a building. We can visualize it any way we like. The bottom is on earth, and the top reaches into heaven, and we can make it whatever way we like. There's his ladder on top and reached to heaven, and behold, the angels of God, this is verse 12, were ascending and descending on it. So you've got angels going up and down this ladder. And it's okay, that's nice. And the Lord stood above it. Okay, now Jacob is going to have he's having this dream with angels ascending and descending. So there's a connection to heaven. There's a gate into the heavens here. Uh, Jacob hears the Lord speaking to him. This is a repetition of the covenant promises that are specific to Jacob. Okay, I am the Lord. And again, he uses the name Yahweh. Um, this is not the place to argue about when the name Yahweh was revealed to Israel. Some say that it was not revealed until Moses. Others say that it was known from the very beginning. But of course, Moses wrote Genesis, and Moses wrote Genesis after the name had been revealed to him. So we don't know for sure what name the patriarchs used. But it may well be that they knew the name Yahweh, the Lord, all the way from the beginning. That's entirely possible. So he says, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, which is just north of Jerusalem, I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring will be like the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and the east and the north and the south, and in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Okay? So there's a bunch going on here. I'm the God of your fathers. This land is yours. Your nation, your offspring shall be great, and all the families of the earth will be blessed through you. So this is the messianic blessing. There's the land blessing. There's the personal blessing. There's the national blessing. There's the messianic blessing. All of the key blessings that God made to Abraham and repeated to Isaac are now Jacob's. And Jacob has known this, but this is God himself repeating the promise. There's some important things in the grammar. As we look at these promises, all of the promises as they are made to Abraham, to Isaac, and then to Jacob, are in the indicative case, well, kind of a future tense indicative. So I will bless. I will make you a great nation. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And all the families of the earth will be blessed through you. Uh, there, there is never a conditional clause in these things. God doesn't say to Jacob, if you are an honorable man and keep my commandments and do no wrong things during your life, then I will be your God. And there is nothing like that. He does not say, uh, if the people of Israel turn out to be a righteous and holy nation, a kingdom of priests, and honor my name, one and all, throughout all of their generations, then I will bless them. The blessing is unconditional, and the blessing has no time limit. So this reiterated blessing to the patriarchs has to be understood in its broader context. This is the promise of God for all of eternity into heaven itself. Israel will be living out this blessing. And of course, we'll all be brothers and sisters when we get to heaven. But we won't all be Christians. There will be believers of Israel. There will be believers of Christendom. There will be believers of the prior to Israel. There will be believers after the church, and we'll all be in heaven together. So this is that's just the way I see it, and that's. In order to make all of us one big happy family, you've got to ignore some of the distinctions, and these are here. Behold, I'm with you. This is verse 15. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. So this is a very specific thing, that you, Jacob, will be away for a while, but you will come back to this land. This is the land of promise, and this is the place where you will live out your life and be buried. Now, Jacob is eventually going to go back to, or down to Egypt, but he insists that his bones be brought up to Hebron to be buried in the promised land. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep. So this is the dream, and it is essentially a reiteration of the promise and a specific promise to Jacob that he'll come back here. So that the importance of the land takes on even more weight. So I won't leave you until I've done what I promised. Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't know it. Okay. Jacob wakes up, and we see that in verses 16 to 17. And he realizes what's going on. And he was afraid, and he said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God and the gate of heaven. Okay, house of God is translated, well, in Hebrew, the word is Bet El, or Bethel. Lots of churches get named Bethel, or Bethel Bible Church, or Bethel Baptist Church, or Bethel Reformed Church, whatever. It is named after this place. The term itself simply means house, Beit of God, El, Beit Elohim, the house of God. So Jacob says, "Here I am. I'm right here in the house of God. There's his stairway right over there, leads straight up to heaven. This is his vacation spot on earth. This is the spot." Now, in the years after this time, a city will eventually be built, which the Bible calls Bethel. It remains about 12 Roman miles north of Jerusalem. Archaeologists have been arguing for many years about the locations of Bethel and its sister city, Ai. Uh, and that's way outside of the reach here. We know it's on the Patriarchal Highway, right on the highway, and we know that in the early Bronze Age, when this takes place, there was nothing there. So whatever city we find there shouldn't have a layer at all for the early Bronze Age, and probably will not have much of anything during the Middle Bronze Age. It may, but the Bible just doesn't have much to say about it until we get into the kingdom age under David. Okay, so this is the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven, the Bab Hashemayim, the gate of the heavens. Uh, and it would seem that way. Here's a house on earth, and from this house you can climb a ladder, see heaven. Now, Jacob didn't try to climb the ladder, not even in his dream. But there is an important message for Jacob in the ladder itself, that uh, no matter where you go, Jacob, you're going off to Padanaram, which is months away, and you're going to be gone for a long time. But no matter where you go, you have a connection with me. You are my man, and I'm going to follow you wherever you go, and you can always stay in touch with me. I'm as close as your prayers. That's that's the message. There is no sacred place, which is the only place where we can stay in communion with God. Later on, when God decides to have a portable house for himself, he has the people establish a tabernacle. And the reason for the tabernacle is simply that it has to be movable. It has to be movable. It was the Israelites themselves who decided they wanted to be like the other nations and have a real temple in one place. I'm not at all sure that God ever particularly approved of the temple, but I suppose it was simpler than the upkeep on a tabernacle. So anyway, uh, God's promise here is of universality. Wherever his people are, he remains their God. And you can come to God from anywhere at any time. It was part of the fun of this Zoom meeting. It's a different time and place for every one of us. Different time of day, different place in the world, and yet we can all have this direct conversation with God, which is pretty neat. So, verse 18, early in the morning, Jacob took some of the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on top of it. Had he called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Now, we don't have any record outside of this bit of Genesis that there was any city named anything there. And we don't know if this suggests that there was a city. It doesn't seem that it is. If there had been a city here, Jacob would have gone into the gate area and stayed in the caravansary. He would have stayed in the city because that really is safer. Instead, he slept hard out in the open, slept rough. and he called the place Bethel. But eventually there was a town there, and the Canaanites would have named it Luz. And then Jacob made a vow saying, interesting, Jacob made a vow. If God will be with me and will keep me in the way that I go, and give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. So Jacob makes a conditional promise to God. This is it says he's making a vow, but in fact, he's making a conditional promise. If God, you will be with me and you keep me in the way I go, and give me bread to eat, clothing to wear, so I come again to this place in peace. If you do those five specific things, then the Lord shall be my God. Okay, an interesting bit there. Now, perhaps we can take this in the best of all possible ways. Maybe he's making what we call a first class condition and saying, since all of these things are true, then the Lord shall be my God. It's hard to tell in Hebrew. It would fit Jacob's character to be putting a bunch of conditions on God. You got to get me back here safe, otherwise it's the deal is off. And then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I've set up for a pillar shall be God's house. Okay, Jacob has named the place God's house. He's named it Bethel, and he's made a promise to build some kind of a temple for God there. He never does, but he makes the promise. And all that you give me, of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. So he promises to tithe of his prosperity. It's, this is Jacob at his best. He's bargaining with God. God has already promised to bless him, and God has not asked for any responses. And yet, Jacob seems to be uh, trying to twist God's arm. So Jacob went on his journey, and he ended up in the land of the people of the east. As he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep beside it. Now, this photograph in the background that you're seeing here is in the general land area of Padanaram. This is the Euphrates River, and this is at a spot in far northern Syria, near the border with Iraq, and also not too far from the border with Turkey. It's about 55 or 60 kilometers from the Tigris River here, which is the boundary with Iran at this position. And directly to the north of here will be the mountains of Urartu or Ararat, where the ark came to rest. So this is in the far northern reaches of the Mesopotamian valley, the Tigris-Euphrates Valley. It's a relatively fertile area. You can see that the floodplain here of the river is quite well watered, and there's lots of crops growing. The higher ground is primarily pasture land until you get all the way up into Urartu, and then the trees grow. But here, in this general area, it's primarily pasture land. It rains enough that sheep and goats can find plenty of pasturage. So what we're going to find here is a group of people who've stayed behind in Haran, the northernmost city of the Fertile Crescent. Now, this is where Abraham's father stopped and where he died. Abraham came from Haran all the way to the Promised Land. The larger name for this area is called Padanaram, and it's the broad plateau of Aram, or the Aramean people group. Aramean is simply the name that we give to the northern Mesopotamian people group. Later on, we're going to get the language Aramaic, which is the language of Mesopotamia at the time of Daniel. It's the language that Jesus and his disciples spoke in New Testament times. It continued to be the language of Syria until fairly recent times. We call that language Syriac. Syriac is the foundational language of the Arabic dialect. So this is a fairly important area, and it's a very historical area. And this is the homeland, or a part of the homeland of Abraham. This is where the family would have set up. So Jacob was going along, and he looked and saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. All right. Well, that sounds easy. Uh, and the flocks were being watered, and the stone on the well's mouth was large. The reason for putting a stone on the mouth of a well was to keep wild animals from falling in and dying, basically, try to keep the place clean. Unless there had been some kind of a stone circle built around the well, it would be easy for sheep and goats and people and who knows what fall into the well, and that would not be good. So the shepherds would come when it was time, and they would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and then put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. So Jacob said to the shepherds that he ran into there, "My brothers, where do you come from?" And they said, "We are from Haran." So they're within easy walking distance of the tribal home of Abraham, his ancestors. He's arrived at the place, and he said to them, "Well, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" And they said, "Well, we know him." And he said to them, "Is it well with him?" And they said, "It is well. And behold, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep." So there we have it. This is a very big deal. So we're discovering some important things. One, the stone needs to be moved, and there aren't enough of us yet to move the stone. Secondly, Laban, Uncle Laban, good old Uncle Laban, is very nearby, and in fact, alas, as coincidence would have it, Rachel is coming even now. So as we watch, here comes Rachel. Then verse 9, while he was still speaking with him, Rachel enters stage left with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now, if Rachel is a shepherdess, this means she is probably still in her teenage years. Children began taking care of the sheep when they're about 8 or 9 years old, maybe 10, and they would continue that throughout their teenage years. As they grow into 16, 17 years old, they can actually take care of their sheep by themselves. Since we don't see an older brother with Rachel, we can assume that she's 17 or 18 years old. Probably not much older than that, because the women in the 19, 20-year-old age group are getting married, and they stop taking care of the sheep. Then it's the job of the younger children in the clan to take care of those sheep outside. So Rachel is still a young woman, and she came with her father's sheep. Now, as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, there were a whole bunch of them. Okay, so we've got this girl taking care of this huge flock of sheep, and she saw he saw Rachel, and he saw all those sheep, and he's collecting dollar signs here, and he's thinking of all of this. And Jacob came near, and he rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Okay, so Jacob moved the whole stone all by himself. He rolled the stone away, which is really rather a remarkable thing. Uh, and so he watered the flock of Laban and his mother's brother, and he's picking up jars and dumping. This is usually not the way it should go. Jacob should be a fairly important person. He shouldn't need to do this, but he did it anyway. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. Now, I put an exclamation point in my notes because this is something that simply wasn't done. I mean, seriously, this is something that simply wasn't done. How would it work today if somebody you'd never met before came up to you and gave you a great big kiss? There's a problem here. Together with all kinds of weeping and the rest of it, it's a very emotional time. Jacob is obviously quite stricken, quite smitten here with Rachel. In an old Disney cartoon, which one is it? The one with Bambi, a story about a baby deer, and Bambi's daddy gets shot by the hunters, but mom raises Bambi, and Bambi gets to be a year old, and uh, starts noticing for the first time that there are girl deer around. Bambi is immediately Twitter-pated. Twitter-pated is a term that refers to the condition of a young man who is stricken by the love of his life. So what we're seeing here is Jacob falling madly, stupidly in love with the first girl that he sees. Um, I don't recommend this for anybody. I mean, seriously, this is almost always uh, a good pattern for disappointment. Nevertheless, uh, Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud, and Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman, that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. And as soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Now here again we've got Laban kissing Jacob, and this may well be an Italian kind of kiss thing on both cheeks. We don't really know. But you don't normally do this uh, with a stranger, or especially not with a Jacob kissing Rachel is really something that you don't do. But Laban embraces him, and Jacob told Laban all of these things, and Laban said, "Surely you are my bone and my flesh," and he stayed with him for a month. Okay, so we get a warm welcome and a month's stay, uh, and here we are, verse 15. Laban said to Jacob, "Because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be?" Okay, so Laban is trying to agree to a commercial relationship. As long as you're here, you're going to uh, you've got to earn your keep, keep track of something around here for as long as you'd like to stay. Uh, and he said, tell me, what shall your wages be? Now, Laban had two daughters. Uh, okay. And the name of the older was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. So we're setting up the situation here. And Leah's eyes were weak. And we're not quite sure what that means. It may mean that her eyes were simply not very pretty, which is possible. Perhaps she's nearsighted and is squinting all the time. Of course, nobody had glasses. It didn't exist in the Old Testament. And people who were nearsighted, of course, had some trouble with all kinds of things. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. So Jacob loved Rachel. Okay. And again, this tells us something about Jacob. He didn't care at all about the character of either girl. He didn't want to know, are either of you um, believers in the one God? He didn't ask. The conversation doesn't seem to have come up. Instead, he looks at Leah and says, well, she's not very pretty. I'm going to go with this other one, Rachel, who is a knockout, obviously a 10 on the scale. And Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Now, in the ancient Near East, women generally were thoroughly covered up all the time. I have no idea um, how Jacob had any idea uh, what kind of shape either Leah or Rachel was in, but she was beautiful and had a nice face, and she could see, or he could see her face, so she's nice. And Jacob loved Rachel. Uh, the Hebrew word there for love is a common word for love, ahav. It means a genuine affection. It's the kind of affection that uh, usually leads to marriage between a man and a woman. When you really like each other and that things are really clicking nicely, then ahav is the word. We see that word used in the Song of Solomon when human love within marriage is the description. It's good. It is not. It's not chesed. This isn't God's love. This is human love, affection, romantic love, even. And so Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, "I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." Okay, so Jacob makes it very clear what he's after. He says, "I'll serve you 7 years for your young daughter Rachel," just to make it clear. Uh, and Laban said, now listen very carefully to what Laban agrees to. He says, "It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man." He doesn't promise to give Rachel to Jacob. He just says that would be better to give her to you than to any other man. Yeah, which may or may not be true, but that's what Laban says. And he says, so you stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. Okay, and Jacob did this in good faith. He thought at the end of the 7 years, which is rather a long time, that I will be able to take my wife and begin a family and do all of the stuff that God has promised. So it would be better I give her to you than somebody else. So Jacob stayed for 7 years and worked for 7 years. And this is, I'm in verse 20 if you're having trouble following me. And they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for the beautiful Rachel. He's so Twitter-pated, he barely noticed 7 years passing. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, that I may go into her, for my time is completed." Okay, to go into her means to join her in the tent, which a single man and a single woman could never be allowed alone. It was considered utterly improper, and it could never happen. So, give me my wife, as she's already betrothed to Jacob, so he can say, "Give me my wife." So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. So here we have the wedding feast. At the wedding feast, there would be a tent set off to one side, which would be the wedding tent. In Hebrew, we call this the chuppah. The chuppah is today symbolized in a Jewish wedding by a kind of a canopy. They'll erect four posts and a canopy over the top, and this hangs down over the top of the bride and the groom and the preacher and the witnesses and whatever. It's an important part of the Jewish wedding ceremony. But in ancient times, it was an actual private place in the midst of the feast area, where the bride and groom would retire at the end of the evening. And so uh, Laban gathered together and they made a feast. But in the evening, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went in to her. Now they were all covered up, and there was no way you could really tell, with the veils and everything. So Leah was with Jacob that wedding night. Uh, and Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. So Zilpah becomes the handmaid of Leah. All right. In the morning, Jacob woke up and he rolled over on this bed of theirs, and behold, it was Leah with an exclamation point. Oh, good heavens, I've got the wrong one in bed with me. Well, this is terrible. Um, I don't feel sorry for Jacob, actually. Jacob is a cheater. He has a tendency to lie. He's greedy. Uh, there's a whole lot of things I don't like about Jacob, and I don't really feel very sorry for him. I I do feel sorry for Leah. Leah is the unloved wife. I, uh, Her father did this deliberately, knowing that her life would be miserable. That this was on Laban's part. This is unforgivable. This is just an awful thing that Laban did, and yet it all works out for the glory of God. I'll show you how that comes up as we go just a little further. Uh, and there was Leah, and Jacob said to Laban, he kept running out of the tent, puts a robe on, out he goes, says to Laban, "What is this you've done to me? Didn't I serve you for Rachel? Then why have you deceived me?" And Laban says, "Oh, well, it is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn." Okay, so Laban is resting back on ancient Padanaram tradition that the eldest has to be married first. And Jacob is no doubt thinking, well, why didn't you give her to somebody else then? All right. Well, so Laban has deceived Jacob, And he's essentially won the argument because Jacob has gone into this woman. She is now his wife, and there's no going back on that. And everyone knows that. I served you for Rachel, but you've deceived me. And Laban says, I'll tell you what, you complete the week of this one. He doesn't even say his daughter's name. I, complete the work, had the week for this one, and I'll give you the other one too. And I'll give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. And Jacob did so and completed her week. So a week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife, along with a female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her servant. And so Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah and served Laban another 7 years. Now, this is where we're going to stop today, but this is a fascinating thing, and it's kind of sad uh, because as we go on, we're going to see this all work out. That in addition to Rachel and Leah, who are under Padanaram laws, both the legal wives of Jacob, he also has the services of Bilhah and Zilpah, the two servant girls, who were going to be in this party, and they would end up sleeping in the same area as Jacob and his wives. And as time went on, when Rachel didn't have children and when Leah stopped having children, then the servant girls took over. Jacob is going to end up with 12 sons and a daughter. And all of that is interesting. Uh, the the most important fact, and we're going to see this in the very next verse, and we'll spend more time with it next Wednesday. The most important fact of it all is the fact that Judah is the son born to Leah. Judah is not the son of Rachel. Jacob's choice was Rachel, but God's choice was Leah. Jacob meant to cheat his way into prosperity, and Laban tried to cheat his way out of a too many daughters problem. And Leah, the unloved eldest daughter, given away under lying conditions, ends up being the mother of the child of promise. The messianic line passes through Leah and Judah. And the tribe of Judah, of course, we're eventually going to get David, and from David we're eventually going to get Christ. This is striking, and it also speaks of the fact that God is at work in things, and He takes into account our own sinfulness, our own selfishness, our own silly preoccupations with things that don't matter. God is not surprised at us. And He accomplishes His will in the world through us and in spite of us. I just love this part of the Jacob story. This is frankly, this is easy to preach. If you like storytelling, this is an easy story to tell. But the point behind it all is that God is working out a great purpose in all of history, and every one of us is a part of that. And God will accomplish His will in our lives, either through us or in spite of us. God is good all the time. any rate, I better quit here. Let me make the sharing stop, and we'll quit for now. I'm going to unmute so we can say bye to everybody. Guys, thank you for being here today. I appreciate seeing everybody. I can't tell you how much it means to me that you take time out of a busy evening to come and listen to an old preacher from North Idaho. I appreciate that. I appreciate it very much. And be a blessing where you are. God isn't through with you yet, and He is able to work His own good will through you or in spite of you. So walk with Him, and in the process, you be a blessing out there in that world He's given you. Love you all. We'll see you next week. Okay? Bye bye.
Thank
Ciao,
you.
ciao.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
Hello, Oscar. Yeah, I didn't see you on the screen there. Good to see you, my friend. Bye bye, everybody. Ciao,
Bye.
ciao.
Ciao a tutti.